Picture this. Paris, 1719. A street called Rue Quincampoix. It's 3 a.m. People are sleeping on cobblestones in the freezing cold, not because they're homeless, because they don't want to lose their place in line. A hunchback is making a fortune, renting his back as a writing desk to traders who need a surface to sign share certificates. A servant girl buys shares on Monday. By Friday, she's richer than her employer. By the following month, she's richer than most French nobles. And the man behind all of it, the man who made all this possible, is a Scottish murderer, a convicted criminal who escaped the gallows, who is now, at this precise moment in 1719, the single most powerful financial figure in Europe. His name is John Law. He has just printed 5 times more money than France has gold to back it, and nobody knows yet. What you just heard is not an exaggeration. Every detail is documented in history, and here's why it matters right now, in 2026, when central banks have printed more money in 5 years than in the previous century combined. Because John Law didn't invent a fraud. He invented the playbook. The same playbook that every government, every central bank, every financial system since has copied, sometimes brilliantly, sometimes disastrously. The question isn't whether this story is relevant to today. The question is whether we're closer to 1719, the boom, or 1720, the collapse. Stay with me. Because what comes next is the part they don't teach in economics class. Before we get to the crash, here's the thing that will genuinely disturb you. John Law was not a con man. He wasn't running a Ponzi scheme. He was one of the most serious economic thinkers of his era, and his core idea that paper money backed by confidence could replace gold and unlock economic growth is essentially how every modern economy on Earth operates today. He wasn't wrong about the theory, he was wrong about one number, one ratio he either miscalculated, ignored, or prayed would fix itself before anyone noticed. 5 livres of paper printed for every 1 livre of gold in the vault. 5 to 1. When France found out, the entire system unraveled in 8 months. The company he built, which had briefly been worth the equivalent of $6.5 trillion, the second most valuable company in the history of the world, collapsed back to zero. And the trauma it left behind in France didn't just wreck the economy, it helped cause the French Revolution. Here's exactly how one man's fatal miscalculation broke an entire civilization. April 1671, Edinburgh, Scotland. John Law is born into a banking family, inherits a small fortune as a teenager, immediately blows it on gambling and women in London. By age 23, he is broke, in prison, and sentenced to death. His crime? Killing a man named Edward Wilson in a duel over a woman. The court convicted him of murder. The gallows was scheduled. Then his friends broke him out of prison. He fled to mainland Europe and spent the next 2 decades wandering, studying monetary systems, gambling in the great houses of Europe, developing an economic theory that he was convinced could transform any nation that was willing to try it. The theory, in short, was this: gold is not money. Gold is just a store of value that limits how much economic activity a country can conduct. If you replace gold with paper notes, backed by confidence and land, not by metal, you can expand the money supply, stimulate trade, and make everyone richer. For 1705, this was genuinely radical thinking. He pitched it to Scotland, rejected. He pitched it to Savoy, rejected. He pitched it to the Dutch Republic, rejected. Then in 1715, something changed. Louis XIV of France died. The new king, Louis XV, was 5 years old. France needed a regent, someone to run the country until the child king came of age. The job went to Philippe, Duke of Orléans. And Philippe, Duke of Orléans, happened to be an old gambling friend of John Law. Law was in, and France, drowning in debt, was desperate enough to listen. 1716. Law gets permission to open the Banque Générale, France's first real bank. The concept was straightforward. Citizens deposit their gold and silver. The bank issues paper notes in return. Receipts, essentially. Those notes can be used to pay taxes, buy goods, conduct business. And because not everyone will come back for their gold at the same time, the bank can issue slightly more notes than it has gold on reserve. The extra notes go into the economy as loans, stimulating growth. This is, in simplified form, how every bank in the world operates today. Law was not inventing fraud, he was inventing modern banking, and initially it worked spectacularly. France's commerce started moving, tax revenue increased. The government, for the first time in decades, could breathe. But Law's ambition didn't stop at banking. In 1717, he founded the Mississippi Company, a trading company granted the exclusive monopoly to develop France's vast territories in North America. The Louisiana Territory, the entire Mississippi River Valley, stretching from the Gulf of Mexico to modern-day Canada. The sales pitch to investors was electrifying. The American interior was full of gold, silver, and untold natural resources. Anyone who bought shares in the Mississippi Company was buying a stake in the richest undeveloped land on earth. There was one problem with this. The Mississippi Valley was not full of gold. It was mostly swampland. But investors didn't know that yet. What followed was the world's first great stock market mania. Between April 1719 and February 1720, 10 months, Mississippi Company shares went from 500 livres to 10,000 livres, a 20-fold increase in 10 months. The street outside Law's offices in Paris, the Rue Quincampoix, became the world's first trading floor. People slept on the street to be first in line to buy shares. A hunchback reportedly made a fortune renting his back as a writing desk to traders who needed a surface. Servants became richer than their masters. Aristocrats who had been bankrupt were suddenly among the wealthiest people in France. The French word millionaire was coined during this period specifically to describe the new class of people John Law's scheme had created. Law himself became the most celebrated man in France. Crowds gathered outside his house. Women threw themselves at his carriage. Foreign dignitaries wrote to their governments that this Scottish genius had discovered the secret to unlimited prosperity. The Duke of Orleans made him Controller General of Finances. John Law, a convicted murderer, a fugitive, a professional gambler, was now the single most powerful financial official in France. He controlled the bank. He controlled the company. He controlled the collection of all French taxes. He controlled the minting of all French coins. He controlled everything. And here is where it starts to break. Law's bank had been printing notes to fund share purchases in the Mississippi Company. More demand for shares meant more notes were needed. More notes were printed. The money supply of France, in the space of months, doubled. Inflation arrived immediately. Monthly inflation in January 1720 hit 23% in a single month. Prices of goods doubled between mid-1719 and end of 1720. Real estate in Paris soared to prices that wouldn't be seen again for generations. The same dynamic playing out simultaneously in the stock market was playing out in housing, in food, in every corner of the French economy. Wealthy investors, the smart money, started quietly converting their paper notes back to gold. They could see what was coming. And then Law discovered the problem he had been ignoring. His bank had printed 5 times more paper money than it held in gold reserves. 5 livres of paper for every 1 livre of gold backing it. As long as nobody asked for their gold back, the system held. The moment confidence cracked, the moment enough people wanted gold instead of paper, the bank was finished. Law tried to stop it. He made it illegal to own more than a small amount of gold or silver. He justified the ban using language about hoarding damaging the economy, the same argument governments would use centuries later when banning gold ownership in the 20th century. It didn't work. People hid their gold. They smuggled it. They converted paper to anything tangible, land, furniture, livestock, jewels, anything that wasn't paper. The share price of the Mississippi Company, which had peaked at 10,000 livres, fell to 2,000 by September 1720, to 1,000 by December, to 500 by September 1721, back to exactly where it had started. Every gain, every fortune, every millionaire erased. John Law fled France in December 1720. He left in disguise in the middle of the night with almost nothing. The man who had been the second most powerful figure in France, celebrated, worshipped, surrounded by crowds, slipped out of Paris like a thief. His properties were confiscated, his assets seized. He spent his final 9 years wandering Europe, gambling at whatever tables would have him, trying to petition for a return to France that never came. The Duke of Orleans, his protector, his old gambling friend, died in 1723. Law died in Venice in 1729, impoverished. The damage he left behind in France was not just financial. The collapse destroyed ordinary people's trust in paper money so completely that France resisted banking reform for generations. French citizens, burned by Law's paper notes, hoarded gold, and refused to engage with financial institutions for over a century. That distrust had consequences. France's financial system remained backward and underdeveloped compared to Britain's, which had weathered its own near-simultaneous South Sea bubble and recovered faster. The financial trauma also deepened the resentment of ordinary French people toward the ruling class, toward a system that had promised them wealth and delivered ruin. That resentment didn't disappear, it accumulated. Historians who study the causes of the French Revolution, 69 years after the Mississippi bubble, consistently point to this moment as one of the roots of a rage that eventually sent aristocrats to the guillotine. John Law didn't just break France's economy, he helped break France itself. Here is the part that should make you uncomfortable. Law's system, the paper notes backed by nothing but confidence, the central bank printing money to fund government operations, the stock boom fueled by easy credit, the inflation that followed, the government banning gold to stop the exit from paper. This isn't ancient history. Every single mechanism Law used in 1716 France exists in modern economies today. Fractional reserve banking, central banks creating money to finance government debt, asset prices inflating while real wages stagnate, restrictions on alternatives to fiat currency. The tools are the same. The arguments used to justify them are the same. Even the language is the same. Law called gold hoarding destructive to the economy. Governments that restricted gold in the 20th century said the same thing. John Law believed genuinely that he had discovered how to create unlimited prosperity through paper money. He was not stupid. He was not a simple fraud. He was, by every account, one of the most brilliant economic minds of his era. And he was wrong about one thing, the thing that always breaks these systems. You cannot print confidence. The moment people stopped believing the paper was worth something, it wasn't. That's not a lesson from 1720, that's a warning for right now. The South Sea bubble happened at the exact same time, in England, copying Law's ideas. And it nearly took down the British government. That story is next on Money Echoes. History does not just repeat, it rhymes. So make sure you are listening for the next Money Echoes. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.